Welcome to the Old Mac Gang Podcast, or OMG, a vodcast with a panel of longtime Mac Apple users who want to discuss the most relevant apps and services to H-season users. I'm Marty, an Apple enthusiast and podcaster. I'm a 67-year-old H-season user who has collected a great group of friends every week to talk about Apple and how it impacts and how senior seasoned citizens can best use products to help them. Let's see who's on the panel today.
I'm Gary Shirk. I live in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm 20 years older than Marty at 88 in July. So I'm primarily trying to simplify my life, mostly using a Mac Mini and a phone. Okay, Chris.
Okay. Hey, I'm Chris. I'm 77. I got my first Mac in November of 84. I spent about 9 years with the Apple user groups in Dallas, and then got an opportunity to work for Apple for approximately another 9 years. And after that, did some IT Mac support at a university on the San Francisco Peninsula. And now I'm retired, living in Tucson. I'm a happy member of the Tucson Mac user group. More on that in a minute. And I am currently using an M1 Mac Mini, an iPhone 16 Pro Max, Apple Watch Series 6, 9th generation iPad, and a variety of the Apple services, of course.
Hi, I'm Peter Petto. I'm 72 from Bay Village, Ohio. I'm a lifelong learner and multiple user group alumnus. Right now I use a variety of Apple computing devices, and I am taken with how well they work together. MacBook Pro, iPad Pro, iPhone, and Apple Watch. Each of them have a few accessories, and I use many apps and services that span all the devices.
My name is Bob Wood, and I'm also in Tucson. I am in my 70s somewhere, and I have been a member of various Mac user groups and an officer since the Mac Classic, and very happy to be here. Marty?
Well, I'm gonna start with a story, and this just happened to me today. I'm still working, and you all have your own projects and your own things you're into, but I want to talk about actually one of our listeners. There was a dissertation defense that I had to chair, which means my job is to make sure that the other faculty stay in line and follow the process and don't get out of hand. And I volunteered to chair it because the person who was doing his defense was a gentleman I met 10 years ago or 12 years ago. He was a visiting teacher from Senegal. He was an English teacher. And he came on part of a State Department exchange with teachers from foreign countries coming, and in our case, to Kent as part of the State Department grant that we had. So we had 16 or so folks. And I think, Gary has come down to have Thanksgiving meals with them. And I think you might have met him. His name is Abdullah Fall. And he was all into virtual reality headsets and was playing with that when we had Thanksgiving meal at my son's house. But Abdullah finished his year or his 2 semesters or semester in the State Department program, went back and said, I really want to come back for a master's degree. So he came back for a master's degree. And when he was here on his master's and through most of his PhD, he started working on the grant that brought him here and wound up teaching the technology class that we had. And so he and I bonded over the years about technology. And when he's writing his dissertation the last year or so, I didn't see him as much. He wasn't in the building. He wasn't working for the Center for International and Intercultural Affairs because he was focused on getting his writing done. So I got to see him today, and I said, Abdullah, this Mac is the first time I brought it out of the house that I've gotten. He goes, oh yeah, I know about it because you talked about it on the Old Mac Gang. And I said, you listen to the Old Mac Gang? This guy's 30. I'm like, you listen to the Old Mac Gang? He goes, yeah. And, so I thought it was kind of worth mentioning him on this podcast or vodcast. And then to watch him today go through, defend his dissertation, which the study was about how do international students make decisions about which country to go to get their international education. And it was a comparative study between the US and Canada. Very kind of close to his heart. And it was, he was young, passionate, sometimes too passionate around his ideas. But over the 10 years, he's like really turned into a scholar and is very, very clear with what he does. But he has this incredible love for technology. We've worked together on this project for years. And so it was a pleasure to be there to see him. Get this, he's been accepted at a position in Nebraska, at the University of Nebraska, working in an international office, working with incoming international students. And so he's kind of really pursued the American dream and has lived out an example of the American dream. But Aileen came with me, my wife came with me to watch the dissertation defense, and the room was kind of full, which is unlike for dissertation defenses. And it was all people over the last 10 years or so that had been instrumental in his life that just kind of showed up to see him do that. So I know it's not totally tech driven, that little story I told, but it was probably the best part of my day to see that happen. And to be surprised this guy's listening to Old Mac Gang, and to have this technology connection with him over the years has been really great too. So that's my story about it. Tonight, I think we're going to focus on automation and either how we use it or how we don't use it, and ideas that kind of extend beyond automation. I don't think this is a one-shot show. I think we'll come back to this again in the future. So consider this kind of an introduction to automation. And we're simply making this show talking about how we've made choices and why we've made choices around using automation or not using automation, and what are the barriers for us with it. I don't know if anybody else has some introductory kind of comments. I was going to start with Bob because he brought the topic to our awareness this week, and I said, yeah, let's run with it. Any other comments or stories? Not any seasoned user news that I could find. So Bob, why don't we go to you and talk about, do you use home automation, and if so, how?
Before we start, I have a story about my mother. When my mother was probably in late 60s or early 70s, she lived alone. She still drove every day. She had a garage door that was really unbalanced, and it was hard to open and hard to close. And one year for Christmas, I gave her a little box. She opened it up, and there was a garage door opener in there. And just the light on her face, her face lit up. Oh, you got me a magic garage door opener. And that was an introduction to how automation, robots, assistance, technology can help the aging accomplish things. They can offload physical tasks or drudgery tasks. Here in Tucson, we are lucky enough to have a pool. And there's nothing with the pool that I can't do but there's a bunch of stuff I don't like to do. So we have a couple of robots that help us with our pool. One is like a submarine. It goes down in the pool and picks up all the stuff on the bottom of the pool and climbs the sidewall and scrapes the potential algae off the pool. And another one floats on top of the pool and is solar powered, and it picks up the stuff that's floating on top, leaves and flowering stuff and those kinds of things. And we like our little robots. We enjoy watching them. It's almost like bird watching, but it's robot watching. And we have a Roomba to vacuum our floors, and we have security cameras. During the day, I am oftentimes either here in my office or in my shop, which is in a detached garage, and my wife is in her studio, which is far away from the front door. And we get alerts on our phones and on our watches that somebody's come to the door, and that helps us get to the door before they walk away in disgust. So the cameras are important. We also have some smart outlets. And one other thing I wanted to mention was FaceTime. Now, is that automation? Well, it's automation in a sense that I can visit with my sister who lives in Pennsylvania through FaceTime without having to go there. And she's been pressuring me to come and see her. It's a long way from southern Arizona. And I don't think we could sit together and talk about things for more than a couple of hours. And I'm not going to fly all the way there or drive all the way there to sit with her for a couple of hours. And my suggested solution is that we try to do a FaceTime for a half hour or so every couple of weeks or once a month. And that way we can reconnect and learn what's going on in the other person's life. And I think that that's something that helps me and hopefully will help her and hopefully help our family situation by having that. And we didn't have that available years ago. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I didn't think it's been interesting watching through the show notes, people adding things through the day, people talking about things, because when I first proposed this, it's going to be, I don't have a lot to say here, but a lot of you reminded me in simple ways that I'm using automation throughout what I do. So, Chris, do you have anything to share?
I haven't been a big user of automation, partially because initially I didn't really have the budget for it. The early toys were pretty expensive. And then there were trouble, and they redid the system. Apple's redone it a couple of times. And so I was sort of devoting time and energy into my photography. At the time, I was doing volunteer event photography for half a dozen groups in San Francisco. And that kept me really busy. And most of my automation has been, in my studies, so to speak. But Bob's mentioning of FaceTime is an interesting one, and it's really been, I think, for a lot of people, a game changer. When AT&T first introduced what did they call it? They had a name for the video phone. It didn't call it a video phone, but this was back, I think, in the 60s, and there were a lot of people worried, oh, I'm not going to look nice, so I don't want it, that type of thing. But today, when we've got Zoom, we're on eCam now, we've got all these other things, but Apple's FaceTime is just as simple as clicking the button and dialing. And I've got several friends who only want to talk over FaceTime. and it makes a difference. And so that, I guess, would be my comment.
Yeah, growing up, I was in Chicago, and the Museum of Science and Industry, if you went down the Hall of Tomorrow, they had a walk-in booth, and I think they had like video demonstrations of what the video phone might be like. This was before any operational way. But the big thing was there was one booth with like benches in it that you could go in and you could close the door, and it was a glass booth, and you could dial on the phone and you could talk to whoever you dialed on the other end, well, for free, but also without touching the phone or without holding anything. It was a hands-free phone, which was the way of the future, I guess. And I just remember as a kid wanting to get to that booth and hope nobody was in there, and then trying to figure out who were we going to call with it. So yeah, I guess what you reminded me of that when you talked about the AT&T product. Gary, any thoughts about automation?
That reminds me that the story now of maybe about 18 years ago, my wife and I went to a summer institute in Blacksburg at Virginia Tech. And we went into the bookstore, and somehow I saw this original eyesight camera. And my daughter at the time lived in Seattle, and I asked the folks that were that were selling Apple and Android products also how it worked. It went to the other end of the bookstore, and the camera worked. And then when we got home, I went to Bob. This is another big push for our Mac users groups. I went to a Mac user group picnic and started talking about it to a friend of mine who's still a good friend of mine named John Johnson. And he told me I have one. I came home that night and we had that eyesight camera working. So, but back to, I like switches. That's about the only home automation I've tried. Yet, Marty, I did try and have it, but a thermostat. However, what I found with most of the switches is the company that sells them, and I even have one now I kind of want to show, is a EVA or Eve light switch. But I found some of the companies that I've had the products from do not keep up with the Apple software. So eventually I have moved back on a switch to a mechanical switch for my outdoor and driveway lights. So that's kind of where I am. But I agree with what Bob said too about FaceTime and Zoom, and FaceTime now is allowing more screen sharing, but which is what I really like about Zoom and being in contact. Also, we didn't mention it, but you can text message with your family during the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Peter?
Yeah, I do not do home automation, certainly not in the sense that if you went to the Consumer Electronics Show and went to the home automation section, I don't have any of that. Although I'm intrigued and curious about many of the devices I see, and probably will dip my toes into the water pretty soon. The closest thing we do here to home automation is, yes, we have a electric garage door opener, and my wife has a couple of HomePod minis, and she uses in a semi-automated manner, not thinking that they're there and just talking to them to trigger music or audiobooks or podcasts. I use my phone for those kinds of things. And the phone speakers are not great. I have a small B&O Bluetooth speaker that I schlep around with me as I pad around the house that has sound that I like. And it's got a partner. So on trips and vacations, it can produce very nice stereo in a hotel room or Airbnb where we happen to be. So I'm about as far from the bleeding edge as you can get, but totally intrigued. And the roadblock has been interoperability. But as I watch the news, I think a lot of those things are getting dealt with. And I got a new car a month and a half ago, and it connects up with my iPhone, and I can start it and turn the air conditioning on or heat on if I need to do that ahead of time, and it'll operate my garage door and do an awful lot of things pretty nicely.
Well, I have always been uh, automation curious. But if you're going to automate your home, you're going to need a system that's reliable and something that's easy to set up and the agreement of everybody else in the household. Because as soon as I put my living room lights on a switch, and I've used switches. I tried Apple's Home app, and I've tried it with my home pods and with my audio stuff, and it always seems to lose it. So I can never, it's not reliable. It's not a reliable platform. And they were talking about Matter, and I don't think Matter is a platform that was going to be sort of a universal platform for things like the Apple uh, Home app and other kinds of products that will come out that would all be a Matter compatible. But that really hasn't gotten into the market much. So you have certain automated objects that, or automated things like lights that won't run on certain systems. So it's all still kind of very confusing, and for me, it's not consistent enough. The service that I found that's more reliable is the a lady, I'll call her, the Amazon product system, and that seems to work better with things like automated switches and lights and such. So I have set up what little automation I have in the house, I have set up there. And, the part about having someone who's going to cooperate it with, if I leave a light on at 8 o'clock, knowing the automation system will turn it off at 10 o'clock, it means my wife has to buy into that. She's not going to go downstairs, pull the little chain on the light and shut it off, and go from automated to old, the old way in which a manual, the way in which we used to do it. It just screws up my whole setup when people do that. They actually go over and turn the light off. So I only have a space where I can do that in, and it's the office in which I do my recording in. And so this office, when I walk into the office, I can go, "Hey, lady, turn on the office," and the lights will come on that I want on. And I haven't added more to it. The lights are not socket switches, but they are light bulbs that you Bluetooth in or wireless, and then I guess Bluetooth into the app that runs it, the A Lady app, where I can go in and set up different devices. There are some other things like some of the spotlights I have in the back. I haven't got set on switches, but I'm still doing those manually from things on my desk. So I could go with further automation with that. I do have security cameras around the house, and those are another form of that I've automated on and off as I need them on and off. What I will do when we leave the house and go on a trip, my family used to have these things you'd plug in the wall, and they'd have little switches on them for hour increments, and it would turn the switch on or turn the switch off as the thing started, as it moved around like a timer. And my dad had them all over the house when we went on vacation. Well, similarly, I have light bulbs that I have set up and that I sync in. So when I'm gone or when we're both gone, I can turn on outdoor lights, turn on indoor lights from my iPhone. But it's not a constant system. It's like when we come back, that all that stuff goes away. So it's primarily used when we travel with it. So yeah, that's my home setup. Chris?
Yeah, I was just thinking back to what Bob was saying. You know, I've had a pool at my house twice over the years, and if I had one now, I'd sure be talking to him about the devices he has, because that is clearly something that I would much prefer to automate. If you've ever cleaned a pool yourself by hand, you know where I'm at. And and then the other subject that I think Bob also has is the robot vacuum cleaners. So, you know, Bob, do you want to share more about that? Because I think those are two really interesting areas.
Well, we do have a Roomba currently that we have named Rosie, as in the TV shows The Jetsons. In fact, we got a little Rosie sticker and stick it on there. We are considering replacing her, and she can't hear me from here in the office, which is good, with one that is more connected to an app, and it also not only goes around and vacuums, but it's one of these ones that maps out the house, and you can say, "Oh, I want you to vacuum room X today," and it goes off and does room X, and then it comes back to its charging station, and it can even empty itself automatically. So that is a possibility, and that's something that's going to be on the Tucson Macintosh User Group Geek Gift Guide in the fall. And maybe there will be one here at our casa, but we'll see.
I've got a Roomba, and we had kind of one that somebody gave to us that was a used Roomba, and I said, nah, let's go all out. So I got a really nice Roomba, water, washing, all that stuff, because we have hard laminate floors or artificial laminate floors, and it scares the hell out of the dog. So the dog goes absolutely nuts. We have to take it out of the room. And so but the dog also sheds a lot. And the thing is, it's good, but it doesn't quite get the amount of shed up that I would like it to get, to be that pristine, clean floor that you see on the advertisements. But yeah, it's downstairs in our main room, and it's all mapped out, and it charts around into our kitchen, and but it does really terrify the dog. And sometimes when I'm not too happy with the dog, I turn it on just to terrify the dog. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to comment on after Marty's suggestion that it scares the dog, it's kind of the opposite of that. We found that with our 3 robots, 2 for the pool and 1 for the floors, at least the first couple of times, we spend the whole time, hour or whatever it is, just following the thing around. Oh, gee, look at that. It went underneath this entertainment center, and now it's coming back out. And just watching it. So it provides some level of entertainment instead of pushing the Hoover across the floor.
So we've got some comments coming in through the chat. S. Becca said, I use my HomePod Mini by pairing them with my TV. So since I'm in the Apple TV device, since I'm in an apartment and it bothers no one. So the idea of using those HomePod minis, you can have them sit right next to you, and instead of having the television or sound bar blasting across the room. S. Beckus, I do most of my watching right on monitor and screen, and I learned early enough I have to wear headsets or my wife will come in and tell me to turn it down, and that's partly because my hearing and probably some hearing loss, but also because she wants to be able to sleep in the room next door to us. and not hear my late night movies. My next question is, are there any automations that you're tempted by that you'd like to try or wish you could try?
I'd probably put the Apple
Well,
Vision Pro at the top of that list.
well,
But
there is that.
yeah, I'd like to try it.
Yeah, Chris, I wouldn't consider that an automation. I would consider that an expensive toy. Peter?
Yes.
There's a lot of things I plan to try, and power switches. I made a list. Power switches are number one, and your comments about other people operating them. I've been watching power switches that have an on-off button right where your switch used to be, so anybody who doesn't know you've automated things can go to the same spot and push a button and turn the lights off and on. But they still will show their state to the system and still can be operated from somewhere else. But my list was power switches, locks. I still carry my key fob to my car, even though my iPhone will unlock and operate my car. But it's nice to know the iPhone will be there in case I forget my fob. Thermostat would be after that, security cameras, and switches specifically for lights so that when I come home, what I want is the system just to sense, I'm a half mile from home, turn on the lights so I don't have to walk into a dark room, you know, and so that's my list of interests and in that particular order.
We have some really good websites, and Peter, they'll be part of the show notes, and also either on the podcast show notes or on the video show notes when I edit the video and put it up on YouTube. But Peter, when you mentioned door locks, we currently have it's a non-automated door lock, but it is a touch button, so you can button your way in if you know the key combo. Mm-hmm. And at night, it's difficult to see unless you know to press a certain area and then the keys illuminate. But even with Aileen having some visual issues and visual problems with macular degeneration, after reading these articles and after what you just said, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could just do this with a phone where she could go up and tap it? So, my wife is a little new technology phobic, and I've had to introduce some things to her slowly and get her to use them, and then she's all in. But these articles, and I'm going to switch to them just so you feel free to comment on it, and then we'll go back for any final comments that we have. This comes out of House Call Pro, 16 smart home assistant devices for senior safety. And they talk about the benefits and how this works. 76% of seniors don't own any smart home devices, according to survey in 2020. That's probably changed. The metrics may be changed on that, but they have some metrics on the different types of services. So then they talk about voice-activated assistants, and we all use the S Lady or the A Lady to some degree, depending on how successful it is. Smart pill dispenser, I think getting the right medication, and if you have some history or onset of dementia, then looking at a smart pill dispenser to provide you with the pill you're supposed to take that day and remind you of that. Fall detection sensors, which are on the Apple Watches, smart thermostats, security cameras, robotic vacuums, as Bob has brought up, smart pet feeder, smart light bulbs, smart outlets, garage door controller, kitchen appliances. So that article by House Call Pro is pretty interesting. And then another one from Wirecutter, which is a New York Times column and section related to technology. And they talk about 14 of the best smart home devices that you can buy. They talk about the research that went into it and who's it for. And then they talk about the kinds of why they picked and tested certain ones, because they were simple operation, because they had smart home functions, wireless connectivity, safety, and a design that wasn't too obtrusive. And so it's a rather lengthy article, but it does go through things like smart smoke detectors and uh, emergency fall detectors, and they talk about the Apple Watch for that. And then finally, well, not just finally, this one comes from Age Tech Collaborative from AARP, Smart Home Technology for Older Adults, and some metrics and statistics on it to start with, and reasons and different categories of smart assistants. In fact, a lot of metrics here. Um, so giving you some idea about why this is important and how folks are using them. And then finally, how smart home, this comes out of AARP again, how a smart home can help you or your loved one age in place right now. So putting these devices in place keeps the likelihood of them being able to stay in place or stay in home, as if some of these devices are used appropriately and correctly. So some interesting articles. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, two quick things. One is that in learning these devices, I was thinking about your wife, one device will help teach you about another. So, for example, lots of people have key fobs where they walk up to their car and when they open the door, it just
Yeah.
opens because the key fob is close enough. That's true with the RFID and cell phones for some of the locks you can get now for your front door. And another thing is, I noticed a comment in the chat saying that Wirecutter's behind the famed New York Times paywall, but I want to put out a thumbs up to libraries. You can go to any of the libraries in this area and read the New York Times. And in fact, if you have a library card, one or two of the libraries around here will let you read it from home, using your library card. So that's something some of the people in our chat might want to check out.
Yeah, I have a Times subscription, so I do follow that column. And this I found in a search that didn't require me to log into my New York Times account. So it might be on the other side of the firewall or the paywall.
Well, right,
I
they
should
have a
say.
soft paywall, and sometimes they'll promote their content through someplace like that, and there's ways to make the link so it can traverse the paywall. I don't know how to do that, but I do know that's possible.
Yeah, and
Well, the other thing is,
yeah, go ahead, Gary.
the other thing is that when I find something of value, then I want to pay for it. I'm not real keen on a lot of quote free stuff because it's not really ever free, or there's always a lot of advertising. So I'm more of the person that really wants to provide my money to stuff that where I'm finding value. So if you find value in the Wirecutter or anything else, I'm glad it's there to help me.
Yeah, a few more comments. Esbeckus, who's again in the chat room with us, he has smart plugs for my fans and heater and lamps, and the idea of just kind of laying in a bed and calling out a lady to turn things on and turn things off. Now I have a automated thermostat. And I don't know if Gary and Peter know this, but we had this one night that it just turned really cold. Unsurprisingly, it's been in the last couple of days. And I got into bed around 1 o'clock and I was like, it's cold. How can I, and I had left my phone with the thermostat app in another room. So if you're going to use automation, it's best that you keep the devices with you. I still had to get out of bed and adjust the thermostat the old-fashioned way and get my phone with the app on to be able to do it. So yeah, it's nice when you can just call it out, but when I'm crawling into bed, I'm not going to call out any woman's name with my wife sleeping next to me. So I'm going to use the app and do it quietly. Um, so any other comments on this? I know Peter, I'm looking in the show notes. You might have some things you'd want to say.
Well, the one last thing I wanted to say is I like programming and I like more personalized and automatic behaviors like, the when I come home, the places I go in the house having the lights go on. And when my wife comes home having the places she tends to go in the house have the lights come on. So I'm likely to incorporate some of my old Raspberry Pi devices into home automation when I get it going, or if shortcuts in Home OS gets a little more elaborate than it is right now, that could run, a sequence, not just off and on, or some online service. So there are lots of things that can help you with automation. And one that a lot of people use is called If This Then That, IFTTT. And I put a link for it in the show notes because it's useful for home automations and other automations when you post something to Instagram, that it also posts it
So,
three
yeah.
other places, for example.
Yeah, that's If This Then That. IFTT is a very cool app to play with, and to get examples when you put that app on or look at it on the website. It gives you all sorts of interesting examples on how you could connect things. So, every time you take a photo and it goes to one registrar, say it goes to, you have it in your Apple iPhone stream, you can also set it up so if this, then that. If you take a photo and it goes to the Apple stream, then it goes to your Google pictures as well. So it's a fun app to play with, and it's kind of got a logic to it that is fun to play with too, and it can help you with automation and getting things in more places than one when you want to set that up that way. Any final comments from the group? No? That's okay. I kind of knew this was going to be a light show because we're not into automation like some of the guys I know that are into automation, but that's okay. Just trying to think of it, and I guess my recommendation for listeners would be try to look at the different options that you have and think of ways in which it could simplify your life. Don't try to do everything all at once. That's why I do my office. It works for me fine, and I know it's not going to be interrupted with process. But pick one thing that you think will be of value to you. Look at some of the links in the articles that we have, and it'll inspire you to think, yeah, I'd like to see if I could do that, or if I could, whether it's vacuuming your home or vacuuming your pool or turning lights on and off or adjusting your thermostat or protecting yourself from carbon monoxide. Pick something and try to get into that ecosphere of automation if possible. I just want to mention Macstock 9. It's coming 3 days on July 11th, 12th, and 13th in Woodstock, Illinois. And early bird tickets are there. You can save $50, I think, until the end of the month. And you can book your room. There'll be information on how to book your room if you simply just go to Macstock Conference and Expo. All one long word, Macstock Conference and Expo.com, and it'll give you information about the Macstock conference that'll be coming up this summer. I know Bob will be there. Bob, you going to be there? Bob will be there. Gary's going to be riding shotgun with me across to Indiana, and we'll make it to Macstock too. And we hope to see you there if you can make it. So we're going to wrap up the episode. Our next live episode will be next Wednesday, March 26th at 9 p.m. I will be on the road, but we're going to try and cut the show on the road. You can catch us on YouTube and watch this crew at YouTube facebook.com/@oldmacgang. You can always pick up the podcast or video later if you missed the show. Please share this with your friends and also with your Mac user groups. Our music bed is by Philip Gross, Marrakesh, courtesy of the Free Music Archive. More information about this podcast and other podcasts can be found at thepodtalk.net. All one word, thepodtalk.net. Thanks to the group, Gary, Chris, Peter, and Bob, and thank you for being part of the Old Mac Gang. See you next time.